not just an England-France problem, right? We are seeing boats now coming from the beaches in Belgium. The Netherlands is not that far away, only 100 miles from the UK coast. And so there's an opportunity for France and the UK to go jointly to the EU and say, look, let's have this arrangement for all those countries that are in reach, because the only way we're going to stem this incredibly dangerous tide and make sure we don't have bodies on the beach is by stopping the trade altogether.
Yeah.
And the only way I think we can do that is by having 100% return. Essentially, Kathy, everything that we've done so far to stem the flow of migrants coming very dangerously on small boats across the channel has not worked. And the reason is because those awful people smugglers and the people who they're exploiting are effectively making a gamble about crossing, that the price they pay to the people smugglers is worth the risk, because there's still a high chance of them succeeding. And even if we manage to put in place the legislation that the Prime Minister has promised, we put Rwanda in place, all that will happen, as far as I could see, in this business situation is that the gangs will lower their price in the face of higher risk. So I was trying to find a way where we could guarantee 100% inability to cross, so that the business, if you like, of getting people across these gangs undertake would not exist. There would be no service to sell at any price. And the only way to do that is to return people immediately to France. Now, the reason we can do that at the moment is that quietly, the advent of military primacy in the Channel means that we're intercepting over 95% of people who attempt to cross, either on the beaches in France or in the Channel or on the beaches in the UK. So
because the military are doing a sort of deal with France and they're getting on with it behind the scenes.
So the operational relationship is very good now with France.
Right.
And so that gives us the chance to return 100%. Now, the question is, how do you persuade the French to agree to that? Well, the trick, I think, is to say to them that for every person we return to France, we would accept a genuine refugee from within France who wanted to settle in the UK, which would allow us to settle them in a controlled way. Now, the key thing to realize, Kathy, is that by accepting these returns, and in exchange for a genuine refugee, nobody would be able to cross, which means that nobody would be intercepted, which means we wouldn't then have to do any of these exchanges.
Right. As I said, it sounds like a really neat idea.
Business would disappear.
Right, okay. Neat idea, but is the UK government up for it? And is France up for it?
Well, this is what I'm hoping. The Prime Minister is off to a summit with Emmanuel Macron on the 10th of March. It's the first major summit between the two countries for a long time. And part of the mission there is to reset the relationship. And I have no doubt that they will be talking about this relationship, about this problem in the Channel. But the key thing here...
Yeah, but has Downing Street sort of showed any interest in your plan? Do you think you can get them interested in it? And can the French reciprocate?
Well, I'm a humble backbencher. One of the ways to get attention, Kathy, is to write in your newspaper, which I am very happy they found space for me today. So hopefully they've read it. And let's see, the phone hasn't rung yet, but let's see. They might have other things on today, given the anniversary.
Okay.
But the key thing to remember, though, Kathy, is that it's not just an England-France problem, right? We are seeing boats now coming from the beaches in Belgium. The Netherlands is not that far away, only 100 miles from the UK coast. And so there's an opportunity for France and the UK to go jointly to the EU and say, look, let's have this arrangement for all those countries that are in reach, because the only way we're going to stem this incredibly dangerous tide and make sure we don't have bodies on the beach is by stopping the trade altogether.
Yeah.
And the only way I think we can do that is by having 100% return.
Obviously, your deal, if it's taken up by either side, would stop a problem coming up in the future. But we've also got this backlog of 160,000 asylum seekers who are waiting to be processed. Do you back the government's reported plan of clearing this backlog by scrapping face-to-face interviews for 12,000 people? Or do you share the concerns of the British Red Cross that you're talking about getting people who are traumatised, who might not speak English, to fill in, they have 20 days to fill in a questionnaire? That's going to potentially lead to people who should get asylum not getting it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be challenging. I mean, on the people themselves, I mean, obviously there is a lot of assistance available for them, and you can get, there are charities and others who assist people who are looking at refugee and asylum claims in the UK. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. I mean, I've read, like you, in the newspaper that the questions are, there are some of the questions that nobody's going to say yes. I mean, have you been involved in terrorism? Seems like an odd one to me. But so let's wait and see. I mean, look, if 95% of those people from those countries are getting processed and are achieving asylum anyway, then maybe it's a sensible thing to kind of risk assess on the basis that we've got whatever it is now, 160,000 people in the waiting list, many of whom have waited over 6 months. Everybody wants to clear them quickly. The key thing, I think, though, is that the Prime Minister has promised that he's going to put another, I think it was 400 people into the Home Office to deal with some of this backlog and process it quickly. And that's in everybody's interest. So I think we'll have to see how it goes. I mean, intrinsically, it doesn't, rationally to people that would say, well, hold on a minute, they're going to tell you what you want to hear on a form, and you only would elicit further information by examination and interview. But the Home Office is quite experienced at kind of risk assessing and triaging people from their initial application onwards. And I suspect that there'll be a bit of that behind the scenes as well.
I mean, you can understand people looking at the Conservative government and thinking this is the height of incompetence to allow a backlog of 160,000, can't you?
Well, no, not really. I mean, the thing to remember, of course, is that we're a bit of a victim of success. So the reason that we have these numbers coming across the channel is that we were so successful at closing down the route through the tunnel. You will remember, Kathy, because you're a journalist, so you store this news away, that there were regular stories about migrants coming through the tunnel in very dangerous circumstances, or indeed coming by other routes. That awful, the awful mass killing, I guess it was, of I think 42 migrants at the back of a refrigerated lorry in Essex not very long ago, right? There were other routes where people were coming in great numbers. And we very successfully closed those down. So the gangs looked for other routes, and they found the channel and realized that it's much easier than they'd hitherto understood with these boats. And so the numbers have come in great, in ever increasing amounts over the months, and it's taken a bit of time to catch up.
Kit, people wouldn't need to come this way if there were better, safe routes to come. I mean, how many, for example, came through the refugee resettlement scheme last year?
Well, I don't have the number in front of me, Kathy. I'm not a government minister anymore. But
well,
I mean,
I've got that number to help you out. It was only 1,391 people. I mean, those routes need to be expanded in tandem with cracking down on dealing with the backlog and cracking down on new people coming by boats, don't they?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you can't see that as a standalone route. I mean, don't forget some of the specific routes that we've got with Afghanistan, Syria, obviously Ukraine, we've resettled a lot of people. Hong Kong, we've got a specific route. So there are
tiny fraction of the overall number, though.
Well, I think when you look overall across Europe, I don't think our record is a particularly poor one. I think we've shown compassion where people have needed asylum and have extended specific routes to people. But I mean, look, the key thing for me is not so much that issue, and that may be one that needs looking at. The key thing for me is that everybody dreads waking up to a story where there are dead bodies on the beach at Deal. And so ending that specifically horrific form of human trafficking was what I wrote about, and that's what I think everybody could be conjoined in seeking an end to that trade. We can then talk about other routes for refugees in a different context.
Kit, one final question. We've heard reports this afternoon that there will be a deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol unveiled on Monday. Clearly, after the shooting of an off-duty police officer in Omagh, a lot of people in Northern Ireland are saying that return to political stability can't come a moment too soon. Do you think the Prime Minister should go ahead and announce a deal, even if the DUP don't explicitly say yes? He needs to face them down, in other words.
Well, I would hope the Prime Minister would try and bring everybody in Northern Ireland along with any deal that's out there. I mean, in order for power sharing to be for Stormont to come back, the DUP have to participate, and so I don't think it would necessarily be a good idea to leave them out in the cold. And you're right, this awful, horrific shooting is a reminder of the delicate balancing act that needs to be played in that part of the United Kingdom. So I as I say, my strong advice would be to strain every sinew to bring every party along on whatever arrangement is put in place. as has happened in other landmark agreements like the Good Friday Agreement in the past.
At Times Radio, we bring the front pages to life. Tune in to hear me, Kathy